Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So, in part one of our composting series, we took you through how we built a compost pile using materials that were available to us and materials that came free and easy to access, such as wood chips, grass clippings, hedge trimmings, kitchen scraps. All of those kinds of things is what we built this pile with. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to show you how we turn that pile and then how we add more nitrogen to the pile to heat it up again. So we're 2 weeks in onto this compost pile, and what I've just done is I've added a little bit of grass to the top to try and get it to heat up again. It's already breaking down quite nicely, but I thought I'd try and get it to heat up again by adding some more some grass, some more nitrogen to the mix. But rather than just leave it to the top, I think a full turn is going to be necessary. Give it a good full turn, and we'll get it back in, and we'll mix the grass into it while we're piling it back up. That way, we'll get the heat back into it. So, what I'll do, we'll pull this out, and then over the next few days, we'll pile it back up again. So that's the front section of the compost pile. As you can see, there's some of the green privet that's still there. There's another layer that's breaking down. There's some more green stuff there. So what we'll do is it's time to give it a good turn. We'll mix some grass in here, and that'll be a good hit of nitrogen as well, and it'll just get that heat back up because it heated up really nice. So we'll get it heated up again. So you can see the difference between the privet bits that I rolled over with the lawnmower and the bits that I just piled up. The stuff that I've rolled over with the lawnmower, that's broken down really nicely, and the bits that I've piled up, some of that is still quite green. But it's breaking down very nice actually. Quite happy with this pile. So the whole purpose of turning this compost pile is to get the inside look inside on the outside and the outside back on the inside, so it breaks down nice and evenly. It's nice and wet. It's still quite warm. It's not hot, but it's still quite warm. So by giving this a good turn and getting some more nitrogen material in here, we'll get it heating up again nicely over the next few days. So look at that, that's where all the nitrogen, all the mycelium is building up. It's nice and warm, nice and damp. If I leave this for a couple more weeks, all the worms will move in, but I'm not ready for the worms to move in yet because there's still a lot of brown material in here. Hello, Zaki. I'm not ready for this to let the worms move into here yet, because there's still a lot of brown materials that are quite a bit rough. They're nowhere near broken down. So what I want to do is I want to get some more nitrogen in here. By getting some more nitrogen type full material, the green material, what will happen is it'll heat up and it'll just break down that little bit faster. We pulled everything out, added more grass clippings to the mix, like I just showed you a second ago, and then we've piled everything back up with lots more grass clippings, and that's got the pile heating up again. And we've done that twice in the process, and then we do that at a 2-week interval. So we pull everything out, add the grass clippings in, put everything back on, let it cook for another couple of weeks, pull it out, add some more grass clippings, pull everything back in, let it cook for another couple of weeks, and then after about 6 to 8 weeks it'll be almost ready to start harvesting. But then we'll keep coming in, we'll give it a little stir. So we're into week 6 of this compost pile, and I'll show you what it's looking like now. So it's had 2 major turns where all of this material has been pulled out onto the ground and properly turned, and now it looks like the heat has gone out of this compost pile. So it's had a couple of days of heavy rain, so there's still a tiny bit of steam coming out of there. So rather than incorporate any more green matter to it and try and heat it up again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to harvest some of the compost, and I'm going to use my trommel for that. And once I've harvested the compost, what I'll do is the old material, I'll incorporate it into the second compost pile. So the unbroken down material, I'll incorporate that into the second compost pile, and we'll carry on from there. So we finally got a break in the weather. It stopped raining. Now, although this compost pile is still quite wet, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sifting it because I'm in need of compost. If it was dry, I'd have no hesitation in sifting this. I'm hesitating a little bit because it's quite wet and it's going to be quite hard to sift. But that's not going to stop me. I need the compost, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sifting this today. Although the compost might be quite wet, as you can see, it's full of life. Look at that. There's worms just crawling about everywhere. There's big fat worms in the compost pile. So this is normally what happens as the pile cools down. You get creatures like worms moving in, wood lice, other kind of insects moving in, and they'll continue to break down the process. While the compost pile is hot, they won't move in. But once the compost pile cools down enough, then they'll start moving in to break it down. Now, the reason that I'm sifting it is I'm going to separate the big particles from the small particles. I'm going to use the small particles, and I'm going to add the big particles back to that compost pile there. I'm going to integrate it into that one. That one's almost broken down, but there is still quite a bit of unbroken down matter. And I need a place to start dumping more of my household waste, because that compost pile that we're looking at right now, that one's probably a couple of weeks away from being ready. I don't want to keep adding fresh matter to this pile because I haven't got anywhere to store it at the moment. So what we'll do is we'll finish this sifting this compost pile. We'll take out as much compost as we can, add the big particles back to that while we turn it at the same time, and then we'll start the process all over again in compost bay 1. So there we have 1 barrow load sifted of the compost pile, and as you can see, it's not that bad. It'll work as a nice mulch for the bed that we're going to put our squash in. It's still quite wet and quite heavy going. Sifting it, that's what's they're all the big pieces that have been sifted out. If that was dry, probably another half of that would have ended up in this wheelbarrow. But it doesn't matter, because what we need is just something to keep us going right now. Ideally, you would want to sift this while it is dry. I mean, I didn't cover the compost pile when it was raining, which I should have done. I should have used a plastic sheet to cover it. and that would have kept it dry. I've allowed it to get too wet. So this process, this can be a solution to what to do when your compost pile gets too wet. When your compost pile does get too wet, turn it, add some more dry material to it, and this is what I'm going to do right now. As you can see, now we're getting to the bottom of the compost pile. Here it's a little bit more dry, and there is a lot of fungal life still in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep sifting this down and keep harvesting it. There's a lot of worms, a lot of life in this soil. So this is wheelbarrow number 5 of the compost. I'll show you, we're about halfway full of that bag, and the compost pile is almost done. So we'll keep sifting that, and we'll get to the end of that. We'll get to the end of this pile, and I'll show you what we've produced in just a little over 2 months. So we've not done bad. In just a little over 2 months, we've produced probably about half a ton of compost. A lot of the stuff that was quite small has broken down, and it's ready for us to use now in the garden. It's still quite coarse material, it's still quite rough, but it's fine to use as a mulch, not a problem at all. If I wanted to make this into seed compost, then I'd let it compost down a bit longer, but it's fine as it is to use as a mulch in the garden. It's pretty perfect for that. The unbroken down stuff has just been piled. Some of it's been piled on the old compost pile, and some of it is just there, and there's a bunch of weeds on top of it, and that'll be used to start off the next compost pile, and we'll go through it all over again. One of the things that I should have done, I wasn't expecting the rains to last as long as they did. I should have covered the piles up. That would have made sifting it a hell of a lot easier. It would have kept the heat inside, and it would have composted a lot quicker. That's a lesson for next time. But Erwin, that's the complete composting process from start to finish. I started this video 2 months ago, and we finally got to the end of the process. We've not done bad at all. We'll let this rest for a day or so, and then we'll use this in the garden when we plant our squash out. So Erwin, so that's how we've made the compost, that's how we've heated the compost pile up. If you've liked what you've seen so far, do me a favour, hit that thumbs up, subscribe for regular updates, and in the next episode what we'll do is we'll show you how we've applied that mulch to the garden, and how we, once the compost has been fully sifted off, how we'll layer that into the garden and plant into that. So we'll leave it there for this one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.